Welcome everybody to this episode of Who Killed Joseph Smith. I wanted to go through my theory again really quickly, why I believe it was an inside job. I've admitted that I don't think I have the evidence yet to prove absolutely in court that it was an inside job, but I'll tell you why I think the evidence is saying this was done by John Taylor and Willard. The main evidence is that gunshot through the door that did not strike Hyrum. And we can prove that. And we did that with the ballistics. Both that injury would have been way far worse on Hyrum's head, and the shot through the door would have looked very different if these were the two things that actually were the kill shot. So if Hyrum wasn't shot through the door and was actually shot through the chin, which again, the ballistics and the forensic evidence proves he was shot through the chin and it exited out of the side of his nose. If that's the case, then how was that shot made? Is there any possible way that it could have been made where someone in that room took this shot and Willard and John weren't lying with their description? Why did they come up with this elaborate, he was shot through the door and then he was shot again when he was laying on the floor, if this was really the shot? So I invited onto the episode tonight Gentry, and he is the ballistics expert that in the movie was taking all the shots with the muskets and the rifles, and we're going to talk in detail about why the shot that Willard and John described is impossible. There we go. So Gentry, thanks for being on this episode with us of Who Killed Joseph Smith.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
So yes, I called you a ballistics expert. How do you feel about that title?
Like very inadequate. But
Really?
I mean, I've shot a lot of guns in my life, and I'm currently I shoot a lot of guns. I know what guns do and the damage that guns do based on my experience.
I wouldn't recommend anybody says anything to a guy who shoots a lot of guns like, you're no expert. So we're just going to go with your experience tonight of how you experience these guns and how they're different than other guns that you're familiar with. Sure. And first of all, I want to say you had an amazing aim. We only had so many targets that we could shoot. And if we had missed the targets, it would have changed all of our testing. And we had to hit this really small target for it to work. And you, one shot after another, kept hitting the target. I was like, it's unbelievable. So thank you for being so good at shooting.
That wasn't me. No, like definitely I don't feel like it was all me, because it was tough when you have that much like fire going in your face and then you're trying to hold it steady and you don't know when the gun's going to go off. Like it was not easy, but I think the divine intervention for sure helped those bullets hit where they needed to be.
Good. I'm glad you're still alive. We tried to be as safe as we possibly could, but neither of us knew what was going to happen when we're shooting this shoulder cannon.
Yeah. Do you remember when we first got it? Yeah. So we get it, and I go, I don't know if I dare shoot this thing. And you're like, okay, I'll shoot it. And I'm like, well, if Justin's going to shoot it, then I probably need to shoot it, because we bought it off the internet, and right. I didn't know if it was a replica that you could fire for sure or what. And I did the purchasing, and I'm like, I think you can shoot this, but there's still so many variables. I've never shot a black powdered gun like this that has the open pans and everything. So it was a new experience.
The flintlock is a new experience. Exactly. Yeah. So, well, that leads me into my first official ballistics question. How many different guns have you shot in your life?
At least probably 40. 40? Yeah. Pistols,
rifles, everything in between?
Yeah.
Okay. How many total rounds have you fired in your lifetime?
And I know this probably,
best estimate, obviously.
Yeah, I would say at least 3,000 to 4,000. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but think of how many you shoot a year. You know, like you go out and you usually shoot 100 rounds probably, and then you go maybe 6 months later and shoot another 100 rounds. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but piled up.
4,000, and that's usually just going to a range or on a hunt, or
so before the hunt, I'm sighting in all my rifles, and I usually shoot. Depending on how off your gun is, you can go through a whole box of bullets right there, which is 20 to 25.
Right.
And then during the springtime, I do a lot of shooting with pistols, 22s. smaller caliber rifles and stuff. And then this time of year, I'm shooting a lot of like long range rifles. So I'm shooting out to like 1,000 yards and stuff.
And what's your experience with black powder rifles?
Only the modern style that actually have the barrels that
are rifled
barrels, and they don't have, everything's all enclosed. So the primer and everything goes right into the back of the barrel.
Yeah.
And so nothing's exposed, nothing's open. So more modern.
But that's the question I was always asking you is when you shoot a deer or some sort of animal with a black powder rifle, does it just knock it off its feet when it gets hit?
I've heard of stories of that happening.
Really?
Yes.
Have you ever seen that?
I've seen it with even smaller caliber stuff, like a bow. Like I've seen people hit stuff in the right place with the bow, and of course it'll knock them down. But
I don't know. But remember, one of the things in the movie I was trying to figure out is John Taylor, was he falling out of the window? Could he have been shot back into the window?
Sure.
And the detective was like, no, you can't. That breaks physics. If it was going to throw you, then when you shot it, it would have thrown whoever shot just as far back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I've heard from other hunters is typically when you hit the animal, it just drops. It doesn't make it go flying.
That's what I meant.
Like in
it doesn't make them move that direction, but yeah, it'll make them fall down typically because they lose all filling and stuff, and it'll just make them drop.
So out of all the 40 different weapons you've fired, what's your favorite?
My favorite is the 6.5 PRC.
Okay, what is that?
So it's a 6.5 Creedmoor gun, but it's a little bit more power. It's like a Magnum casing, and it just has a lot more power and velocity behind it. So when you hit an animal, it'll actually do more damage. So you can take down bigger animals, but the recoil in that gun is a lot less than like a normal hunting rifle or whatever.
Because the idea is you don't want to hit the animal and then it runs off bleeding.
Yeah, and you can't find it.
You can't find it, and you want it. Okay. Okay. So of all of the guns that you've fired, which would you say compares the most to firing this 69 caliber musket?
So I would say a 300 Win Mag without a muzzle brake is what it feels like. Or like a really high powered shotgun or something, like a 12 gauge or a 10 gauge shotgun or something that's really, really powerful. When I first shot that gun, I don't know if you remember or not, but the first time we went and shot it.
I do.
Holy cow, dude. So I called you like the next week and I was like, I am bruised on my whole left side of my face from that thing for like a week. And I only shot it, I think, 8 times. And I was like, oh my gosh, that really, really hurt. Like the way this gun kicked, it like came up and hit me like in the cheek every time.
I know. I felt so bad. I'm like, Gentry, you want to go do some more testing? And you'd be like, okay. You knew you were about to have to pay for it for the next week. Yeah. So I've shot the 300 and that's a big kick. So this thing, it is a replica. We didn't get an original because we were too afraid of firing it. What if the thing blew up on you? So we wanted to be safe, but it is an exact replica of the muskets from that time period. And it took us a little bit of adjustment to figure out how that flintlock mechanism works. That's for sure. But once we figured it out, the first shot, remember, didn't fire. We were all like, this isn't going to work. This thing's a piece of crap. Oh.
And we learned.
We tried it again and it goes off and we were all just like, what the heck?
Yeah. Well, we had to try a couple different things with pushing the powder down the barrel a little bit better and stuff to get it to be able to fire correctly. So
the crazy thing about the flintlock is the delay from when you pull the trigger, it sparks, the spark ignites the gunpowder and then the fire goes off. How much time was there between that delay between pulling the trigger and actually firing?
At least 2 seconds, probably.
So how do you keep it aimed when you're pulling the trigger? It's pulling your aim off, isn't it?
Sure. Well, that initial, when you've shot a gun over and over and over again, you get the recoil gets you to where you get kind of, they call it like gun shy, like you're holding the gun in your shoulder and you're afraid of the recoil that when you pull that trigger, it's going to go off.
Yeah.
So that's one good thing about this that I noticed when I was shooting it is when I'd pull the trigger and the fire would go, I'd have that initial reaction like, oh, this is going to hurt.
Yeah.
And so I'd jerk a little bit. And then it would give me enough time to really hurry and settle and be like, nope, I got to hold right here, right here, right here. And then the gun would go off. And then I'd luckily get back on target in enough time to be able to
so you'd aim and then, but not fully aim.
No, I would fully aim, but I'd pull the trigger and then, because of the reaction that you have after shooting guns over and over again, like it eventually, like you want to pull back. You don't want to, that kick scares a lot of people. So
again, I'm super sorry about the injuries. I didn't know.
All good. It was actually pretty cool to shoot them. So it was worth it. Yeah. It was worth it to shoot the guns. So,
okay. All right, good. Okay. Next question. Did you remember when one of my theories was supposedly the mob was shooting from outside of the jail through the window and one of those shots struck Hyrum in the back. And I was like, in order to get the proper angle, you would have to be standing, quite a bit of ways back.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that they would be accurate enough to all be firing through that window. So I thought some should hit outside of the window and there would be marks on the stone. And of course there's no marks. So we're like, all right, let's test this thing. How far out did you walk that target when we were doing the long distance shot?
So the first time we shot a long distance, I walked out 100 yards.
So we put a target out 100 yards, fired at it. What did you think was going to happen?
I thought I would miss horribly.
Right. And what happened?
I hit.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, I couldn't believe it. Not, oh no, I was glad to know, but I had to refine that part of the theory because I was like, clearly these things are accurate from a distance. The target was way smaller than the window opening.
Yeah.
So you could someone a decent shot could have shot through that window.
But would they have all hit Hyrum, right? Like they would have went around other places in the building, right?
Yes, but I think what we proved is it was possible, even without a rifled barrel, that these things are fairly accurate. So again, I'm backing off that part of the saying that couldn't happen and saying, yeah, that's definitely possible. Yeah, they could have shot through the window.
Still though, you'd think you'd be able to see bullet holes in the building on the inside if they'd gone through, because they might not have hit exactly, but there was only the one, right? That was inside.
There was a bunch against the east wall, but some that were lower than the windowsill. So we have to explain that. And of course, of all the bullet holes that were supposedly in the room, Willard makes it a point of saying there was gunshots in the ceiling above Hyrum's head.
Yeah.
I don't know if I pointed out in the movie how crazy that sounds. Why would you mention, well, there was some over his head, unless you were trying to explain that away?
Yeah.
And how would that have hit in the ceiling? Could they get the angle from outside? I don't know. Of course, I think if you shot through the chin and it came through the nose, it would have hit the ceiling right in that spot where Piercy has it in his drawing.
Yes.
Which was funny because when I was on the Midnight Mormons, I don't know if you saw that episode, Cardin's like, that doesn't even make sense because there'd be a hole in the ceiling. And I was like, there was. And he was like, oh. I was like, all right, you believe it's an inside job now? And he's like, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, next question. And this is an important one. How many times do you think you could load this thing in 2 to 3 minutes?
Like, I think to be accurate.
Load and fire.
To load fire and to actually point at what you're aiming at would probably, you'd have one already in there, right? So you could shoot that one. And in the next 2 to 3 minutes, I think if you got off another shot, you'd be pretty lucky.
Okay, so I'm agreeing with you after watching us reload this thing a number of times. And then after a certain amount of time, your flint doesn't work anymore and you have to put a new flint in there.
Or it would fall out. Yeah,
and there's certainly you could get better with practice. But some studies, like the Lyon brothers, said you could do 2 to 3 per minute. Is that possible?
I don't see it.
I can't see it either.
Yeah.
A regular bullet, 2 to 3 minutes, maybe. But loading this and pounding it down in and getting the pan filled and pushed, I'm like...
Yeah, because when we were filling that was one of our problems that we had is we'd go to fire it and it would light the whole pan up, but it wouldn't fire the bullet out. And so what we realized is you had to actually take your finger and like push the powder into the hole that goes into the barrel to be able to get it to ignite. Yeah,
it was super interesting to actually test that. And now I feel like I can speak very confidently to say, no, you're not doing that 2 to 3 times a minute. Because again, they're trying to explain 35 gunshots into the room, with what J.W. Woods said. And I'm like, the only way that could have happened is if they were handing rifles up the stairs that were already loaded or something like that.
What a mess that would have been.
Yeah, the guy's just standing there reloading. With the amount of time it takes to reload, anyone in the room would run and tackle you and punch you in the face, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unreasonable to think that they were firing, reloading, firing 35 times in the room within 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Next, if the mob really did shoot 35 times into the room, that's 35 plus 12, because Hyrum, John Taylor, and Joseph Smith all had 4 wounds. So that's 12 shots. Plus there was supposedly another 35 into the room. If you shot into that room 35 times with that musket, what damage would you expect to see in that room?
Like I was saying earlier, like even from the outside, you would see tremendous damage in there. Like it would look like a kid had been in there banging like pots or something against the walls and breaking holes in it. Like it would be bad.
Yeah. Like remember when one of the first tests we did is we just shot a random log and like split it in half.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And shooting at rocks and whatever. I mean, it puts big old potholes in it that,
right.
Yeah. You can tell they're there.
Right. Okay. Do you think that the smoke from the muskets, now that you've fired it and seen how much smoke comes out of them, do you think the smoke would have been an issue?
I mean, if they were all going off together and then had to reload and do it, maybe.
I don't remember a ton of smoke. The most smoke came up here.
That's what I was going to say. That would be the biggest.
Rather than out of the barrel.
Is your biggest distraction is going to be that big fire that goes up, and then the noise, of course, because right after, and depending on how many people you have right there, that would be super distracting, right? Like to have fire going off in all these guys' faces or ears or wherever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the fire was a bigger thing that I hadn't considered than the smoke. But then I was wondering if the gunpowder is different today so it doesn't burn as thick smoke.
Possibly.
Because the smoke didn't seem like a big problem. Because people are like, if there was 35 shots, that room would have been filled with smoke. Nobody could see anything. And I'm not seeing that myself.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
So you talked about the sound. How loud was firing the musket compared to other rifles today?
It's right up there with the top of as loud as all of them, you know, like it's the loudest one. I mean, I think I remember putting earplugs in and earmuffs on over top to.
Yes. For our protection.
Yeah.
How many shots can a mobster shoot with no ear protection before his ears are goners, right?
Yeah. Like I know people that shoot guns a lot, and I know people that have permanent hearing loss because of it, and they just haven't wore protection. And
right.
I don't think it takes a lot. Some people, of course, more, you can go longer, but some people, a good 3 or 4 bullets really close. And depending on where they were at in the room, if some of them were closer than the others, it could have been going off right by their ears.
Right.
If they were in front and somebody was behind them shooting. So for those people, definitely would have been permanent.
Yeah. So 35 shots going off, the sound would have been played way more into that than the smoke. Nobody would have been able to hear anything with all of these. They sound like a cannon when they go off. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And if you're getting that many shots, so 10 shots, 1 per every 10 seconds. Not seeing it. So let's watch some video of our tests now. So this is one of the most important first shots that we did. A lot of people complained in the first episode or the first documentary that I had put the watch against a board, and so that didn't properly mimic it being against a human body. I was like, really? You think that matters? Okay, I'll go get ballistic gel. I put it in denim and I stacked it against this 50-pound sack of sand or gravel or whatever that was. And the boards that it are on is the 2 feet of window sill. That's how wide the window sill is. And shot it to see if the shot was going to knock off the whole window. And this, I put the watch in, and that little dot is what you had to hit. And I was like, all right, man, you were lined up. Like, this is going to be good if you can hit this shot. But here we go.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did you see that kick? You were like,
yeah, that's
when it went off.
Yeah. And it surprised me that I hit that too, to be honest. Like all of those shots, I was like, holy cow, did I really hit it? Because the smoke would clear, right? And then I would look up and be like, oh, please tell me we hit that.
It was amazing. No, what was so shocking about this first shot is the watch, the whole denim pocket all got pushed into that gel.
Yeah.
So I had to cut it open and all the shattered pieces. It was crazy how that so powerful. It moved in there, and you can see that it hit the bag. Mm-hmm. So it penetrated that and hit the bag. I mean, this was when we realized, when I dug all those pieces out of the watch, it was like,
there's no way
he was shot with in his watch with a musket. It's impossible.
Yep.
And the gel's just bouncing along there. I mean, I don't even know if I collected all of the pieces.
No,
they were flying everywhere, right?
Yeah. I think we did the best we could, but.
Yeah, you can see there all of the guts of the watch had got pushed into that gel. And there's all the pieces that we could find.
Yeah. Damage is extensive for sure.
80 grains is all we fired because, again, we wanted it to be safe. What's a typical at a black powder rifle? What do you typically shoot? What would you shoot that 69 caliber ball with?
Typically today's world, hunting or whatever, if you want to make a deadly shot at 100 yards, people are loading their guns with at least 100 grains of powder. Yeah,
so everything I read about the past as 100 to 150 was pretty standard. And normally it's twice the size of the caliber of ball. So we had a 69 caliber ball, so 130, 140 grains. And we only shot with 80. How much more powerful would it have been if we had put the real amount in there?
Oh yeah, bullet would be traveling a lot faster for sure.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been even to find any of those pieces. So we kept it at 80 to prove a point that even if the mobsters had dropped some powder, which you don't really drop powder because the powder packets with the ball are pre-made. You put some in the pan, you shove the rest of it in. It's not like you're dumping it in there per se.
Yeah.
But even if they did lose some powder for whatever reason, I'm like, at 80, it's still just absolutely destroyed the watch.
Yeah, I think that's super reasonable to test at that kind of grains versus the anything lower or higher.
So here's the rifle shot. And you can see it did push the pocket into the gel like the other one, but not all the way. So this rifle is 50 caliber ball. And it was also at 80 grains, and it still, we'll see, did some pretty good damage. Did you watch the watch flying out? I pushed the pocket in, it still made the hole in the sandbag, but I had to go find that watch.
Wow. How would you find all those pieces? Like, to put it back together, to put into a museum?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like now you compare that to John Taylor's watch and you're just, I've shot so many dang watches we have now. It's like, I cannot possibly think John Taylor's watch was shot.
Yeah.
And we didn't stop here. We did the musket, we did the rifle, we did a 22. The 22 did massive damage.
Yeah.
And then we shot it with an air rifle with a pellet just for fun. And that did more damage than supposedly the damage to John Taylor's watch.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I fairly conclusively, I think, that watch in the museum that they say John Taylor's, it was never shot.
Yeah, I would say no way.
Now, maybe that wasn't his real watch. I don't know. Maybe the real one actually did get destroyed. So it's hard to piece all that together. But I'm like, if that's really his watch, there's no way that thing was shot. So
yeah.
Okay, let's see what we got next. Okay, so this is our first panel shot. So what we did is we got a panel, 1/2-inch black walnut to match the panel hardwood in the door at Carthage. And again, in the first movie, I didn't use any panels when I shot the head. And people were like, you used a shotgun with a slug. And I was like, I know, I didn't have a freaking musket at the time. And I didn't think it mattered because I calculated the velocity and chose a round with the shotgun that was a lower velocity than the musket. And it caused massive damage. And people were like, you can't do that. It doesn't work like that. So we did get it this time. And also I got the door panel. I'm like, if you think that 1/2-inch door panel slowed that bullet down enough that it didn't do any damage to Hyrum, let's go see if that theory is true or not.
Yeah.
But we didn't, we only had so many gel heads. So what we first did was we stuck the panel up and we put a 2x4 behind it. And then we would measure the damage to that 2x4. And then between all of our tests of all of the different caliber sizes, using all of the different weapons and different amounts of black powder, then we would know what's the best test to do on the actual gel heads. So we started this one, 80 grains with the musket, shot it like we both expected. I mean, it went through the panel, no problem, went all the way through the 2x4 and blew a massive hole on the other side. Just like you would have expected. Look, see, you were supposed to hit that red dot. So on that one, you lucked out. It hit the target behind it.
It wasn't super critical, so I think we're okay there.
Right. Yeah. Okay, here is same thing. It's the musket, 69 caliber. But instead of 80 grains, we went down to 65 grains to see what that would do.
Common sense tells you, right?
Oh, look, Steve shot that one. Yeah. Did Steve get bruised? I don't remember. But yeah, look at the amount of damage. There's wood splintering, falling everywhere, flying it goes through the panel. It easily just absolutely destroys that 2x4. So you can see the burn, of course, and this is what the detective was talking a lot about, the stippling. When you shoot somebody at close range with black powder, little pieces of that burning powder hit the victim, and you can see that in the wound. That's why he was so certain that the coroner knew what the injury was, is because it had that stippling and there was none around the nose.
Yeah. And you can feel it. It burns.
Right. Yeah, you can see the exit.
Yeah, it destroys it.
Large, yeah. Okay, so then we went, so first we did 69 caliber at 80 grains, then 65 that we just watched, and now we took that down to 50 grains. See what kind of power that has. Now you'll notice.
Yeah, this is crazy.
It just destroyed the 2x4.
Yeah, it split it in half.
And this is a pattern that we continued to observe, that the less amount of gunpowder caused a way more damage on the exit. And it didn't make sense to me at first. And do you have any ideas about why that's the case?
Like the only thing that comes to my mind would be that the bullet is probably doing more damage versus the speed of it. Like the speed takes it through stuff faster, but as you slow that down, the bullet's expanding or contracting or whatever, doing what it's doing, breaking apart and doing more damage.
So yeah, my feeling is the more gunpowder you have in there, the faster the ball's traveling. It just punches right through. So when you slow it down, then it just has the opportunity to transfer its energy into the target more, and that's what causes that damage. So you can expect with a human head, the more gunpowder you had, it would just punch right through it. But if you use less gunpowder or a smaller weapon, then it would have done way more damage to the face than shows up on that death mask. So either way, the death mask shows he was not shot by a musket.
Yeah.
Was that the rifle or the musket that you just shot?
That was the rifle.
Okay, so this is the first rifle shot. 80 grains, punched right through it. Pretty clean. Yeah, now this is the rifle, and we took it down to 65 grains. I can't remember the damage on the back of that one. We'll see if I turn it around. Pretty clean on the front. I didn't show it. Okay. Now is the rifle with 50 grains. So we had done, again, same thing we did with the musket. We did 80 grains, then 65, and then 50. All 3 shots easily penetrated that 2x4.
Yeah.
Yeah, see? 50 grains. It did the most splintering on the back of it again.
Yeah.
It's that pattern that we kept watching. And that's exactly what the detective said. He said, yeah, you'll see that. You'll see that on crime scenes. The lower velocity causes those nastier exit wounds.
Yeah.
So fascinating. So, of course, from the first movie, I was not a ballistics expert. At this point, I'm like, I've shot so many of these dang things. I wouldn't call myself an expert again, but I'm like, I can see patterns developing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So now we have the pistol, and this was a 50 caliber pistol, and we only started at 50 grains with the pistol. And this was just to test and see, because everyone's like, well, the mall probably had pistols. And I'm like, great, maybe they did. Let's see if a pistol, what kind of damage that will do. So here's 50 caliber pistol at 50 grains of gunpowder. Nice shot. Oh, right through it. No problem. Massive splintering on the back. Okay, Gentry. If that shot hits a person in the head, what happens to their head?
It almost explodes. Like it wouldn't be recognizable, in my opinion.
Even if you shot through the panel, we have the panel. We shot through the panel. That's 50 grains on a pistol, and look how much damage it does. And that just does not show up on Hyrum's skull at all. That's how we know he wasn't shot through the door.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. So that was 50 grains. Now we take the pistol down to 35.5 grains. Let's see what kind of damage it does. Penetrates the 2x4, no problem.
Yeah.
Are you shocked at this point, or are you like, yeah, I knew this was going to be the case?
At that low of grains, you would have thought there's probably a possibility.
We were worrying that it wouldn't have enough to push the ball out of the barrel, right?
Yeah.
No problem in it. Yeah.
Yeah. 25 grains.
Okay, now we go to 25 grains. This is our final shot with the pistol. Half the gunpowder. 50 caliber ball with only 25 grains of powder. I didn't even know if it was going to make it through the panel. What do you know?
Does the exact same thing.
Splits the wood.
Yeah.
This one I think actually didn't go all the way through it didn't go all the way through the 2x4, but look what it did.
Yeah.
Is there anything on Hyrum's skull that would suggest anything close to this kind of damage?
No.
That's exactly what I asked the detective. If a shot did that much damage to a 2x4, would it do more or less to a skull? And he said more. So he's like, that should have shown up. So I'm like, a pistol at 25 with only 50 caliber does that much damage.
Yeah.
So I think we've made that point pretty clear.
And I like how you're going through this stuff because you didn't show it in the movie every little step,
Yeah.
So it's good to be able to explain how you got there because people are probably questioning every little detail, right? And how many more scenarios do they want to cover?
Exactly. Exactly. We covered everything we can think of. If there's something that we haven't done yet and you want to see it, ask us. Put it in the comments. Any scenario you want to see. If you want to see us shoot something or run a different test, we're happy to run it for you. So now we actually decide to shoot the gel heads, and I have 3 of them ready to go. And we decided to use the musket 69 caliber at 80 grains, the rifle 50 caliber at 50 grains, and the pistol 50 caliber at 25 grains, just to have the whole range of the most powerful to the least powerful. Let's see what damage they caused. This is actually the stuff we showed in the movie. But look at the musket at 80 grains is like ridiculously powerful.
Yeah, so if his head was up against the door, oh my gosh.
Yes, this is why we explain to people there's no exit in Hyrum's skull. You can see it.
Yeah.
There's not even a crack anywhere in the back of the skull.
Yeah, you look at that ballistics head right there and look around the eye socket right there, and it's broke the bone right there going back up into his skull.
Yeah, this is what would have happened if
that's
you
on the other
shot
side
through that panel and hit Hyrum. There would have been an exit. There would have been other damage, and there wasn't. That's how we know it was only one shot.
Would he have been able to breathe or talk at that point?
Yeah, and then supposedly says, I'm a dead man. Right.
Wow. Yeah, cracks. That's the other side that you're seeing with all those cracks in it.
So we knew the musket was no way. The rifle, I was thinking at 50 grains, maybe it doesn't. We'll see what the damage is going to be after it goes through the panel. I mean, it destroyed the 2x4, so I assumed it was going to do damage to the head. This is still the musket. Pretty gruesome.
You would think there'd be more blood than that.
Okay, so here's the rifle, 50 caliber, 50 grains. Nice shot. Oh, yeah, look, you see that crack right there?
Oh, man. The same.
That cracking is what I'm talking about. None of that. And this is 95% to the same as a human skull at the shatter point. So if that cracked, then the human skull would most likely crack as well. And there's nothing in Hyrum's skull. So I'm like, not only did this shot go all the way through, it just destroys this skull from the force.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment about that?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, the same as what you were saying with that crack right there. Like, there's no way he could have uttered anything or been alive at all, I think, after that kind of an impact.
Right. So that was only 50 grains. Look at that. Yeah, you don't see anything on the face mask or his skull that resembles anything like the damage we saw. Okay, here we go. This is the pistol. 25 grains. That is so little gunpowder that at first we were worried it wouldn't even make it out of the barrel. And just to show the extremes, we showed the musket shot. We're going to show the other shot. Pistol, 50 caliber, 25 grains. Let's see what happens to that gel head. Nice shot. So first of all, we get that splintering.
Yeah.
And then...
Which they say could happen, which he would have had.
Look at his face. Look at that damage. Nothing on Hyrum's skull comes even close to that. Nothing.
Eye socket above, right below his eye, there is a crack there. And then right behind his eye, can you see that one in there?
Yes, and then it gets worse. You can see the blood on this one going all the way back. Let me see when I turn it here. Oh, it exited out of the back.
Yeah.
See that? Bro, 25 grains exited.
I think we were all surprised by that, for sure. I mean...
Yeah, these are not tests that were secret. We didn't do anything weird. Anybody can duplicate this for yourself. Go get you a ballistic gel. Do whatever you want. You shoot those with these guns, with these calibers, and with these grains. You will see there is no way the eyewitness's testimony could be correct. There's no way.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so what a lot of people don't understand is, okay, the first shot that Willard described came through the panel. But the second shot, when he was laying on the floor, the door was open. Nothing to stop it. It was a full-on blast. Willard said it skimmed across Hyrum's chest. So I didn't show this in the movie either. But for him to be laying flat and for it to skim his chest, that means you would have had to have been on the floor, only, 6 inches up off the floor, and shot a perfectly parallel shot to be able to get the skim and hit. But if he's laying, depending on how thick his chest is, it covers your throat.
Yeah, when you're laying down.
It would have
missed his head.
So that shot, just from the description, you already know is impossible, but we tested it anyway. Let's say that the skim didn't happen, but he was able to hit here. Would you expect an exit out of the top? With all three of our guns, with the musket, with the rifle, and with the pistol, let's see what happens. Okay, so the first shot with the musket with 80 grains, yeah, it's not even, at this point, it's like you can completely rule the musket out.
Yeah. There would have been nothing left of Hyrum's face.
No.
No bones. Yeah.
And this is after the first shot. Those two shots, there would have been nothing left.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the rifle, 50 caliber, 50 grains. That one was even worse. But that goes back to my point, or the detective's point, which is the higher velocity just punches right through. The lower just perforates.
Yeah.
Tears you apart. I mean, it's kind of exciting to watch until you start thinking about what really happened in there, and then you just are like, oh, man.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no way that the explanation that these men came up with could be plausible.
Right.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
Agreed. Yeah, look at that. It's horrible.
Yeah.
These weapons back then are just
brutal.
Destructive. Yeah, brutal. And here's the last one. This is, again, the pistol at only 25 grains of powder. By now, we were like, yeah, we know this thing's pretty powerful. Good shot, by the way. Perfect shot. Did you see the exit? Goes through the chin, right through the top of the head. Nothing like that. This is the weakest of all of the loads. Still easily causes that exit wound. We weren't the first to come up with this idea. The Lyon brothers said, yeah, there's no exits in this skull. That's why they came up with one shot. This is why it was only one shot. There is no other way to explain that damage to Hyrum. The way that Willard said there was two shots, it's impossible.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, 25 grains right there. All right, the thigh shot. I didn't get to.
I think you only had one of these, didn't you?
Yeah, that leg cost $800.
Yeah, and I was
Gentry.
pretty nervous to make sure that one was gonna hit right on, but luckily I had something to hold the gun a little bit steadier. But
now we chose to use the musket at 80 grains on this shot, and the reason why is because John Taylor said that ball that struck him hit the bone and flattened out to the size of a quarter. So I bought all 4 possible quarters at that time, and the smallest of them, and then I shot 69 caliber against a hard surface to flatten it as much as we could, and we had that. The only bullet size that even came close to the quarter was the 69 caliber. So I'm like, okay, John Taylor is saying he was shot in the thigh by a 69 caliber. We have one shot. He claims it went into his leg, hit the bone, and then bounced, but didn't make it out the other side. So we're like, all right, let's see what happens. And we only use the 80 grains, our standard 80 grains. And it just destroys the leg. I mean, at this point, were we thinking anything else was going to happen? Or I am so used to shooting that. Yeah. I'm like, wherever this thing hits, it's going to destroy.
Yeah.
So John Taylor said, flattened to the size of a quarter. He was lying. Whenever the doctor took that out of his leg the next day, when he was calmed down, the adrenaline of the moment wasn't in there. Why would he say it was the size of a quarter? Because the next size, 50 caliber, wouldn't even be close to the size of a quarter. The only round that makes sense, according to his description, is 69 caliber, and the 69 caliber, not going to happen.
Yeah. Not to mention that he wouldn't even have a leg left to be able to put back together.
All right, so I have the four or the different sizes of the balls here. 69 caliber, 55 caliber, 50 caliber, 35 caliber, and 30. So you can get an idea of the difference. You can see how much bigger that 69 caliber ball is. When we shot this against stone and it flattened out, it was the only one that is even close to the size of a quarter.
Sure.
Yeah, the thigh is destroyed. There's no bone in there to even mend after that shot.
Or flesh.
So here's the hand shot. Now, what he said here was that the ball that was taken out of his hand weighed half an ounce. So I took all the different balls and weighed them. .69 caliber weighs about an ounce. 55 caliber, that's a half an ounce. So it's actually 0.48. 50 caliber was 0.37. So he said it weighed a half an ounce, that ball. Again, the doctor took that out. He's saying they weighed it. That's most likely the 55 caliber. We used the 50 caliber just to play it safe, which is only 0.38 ounces. And we shot that with the rifle, and we only used 50 grains into his hand. And here's what happened. Yeah,
yeah, he doesn't have a hand left.
Destroyed it. And he's saying that, yeah, it entered in the wrist and lodged in his hand. Every one of his wounds he lied about. Didn't even come close. And it could have just been embellishing. But again, he's the one that said size of a quarter. He's the one that said half an ounce that the doctor pulled out.
Why do you think he did that?
Why did he give that description? If it wasn't the case, because obviously I believe he was shot by a smaller caliber similar to what Joseph had. And so he wanted to deflect attention. If he had said all four of his wounds was a 30 caliber, when their description is it was all shot from muskets from the door, and suddenly he has 4 wounds from a small caliber that matched Joseph's pistol, you can't say that.
Yeah.
So you have to come up with something that throws off that suspicion. Oh, no, it was the size of a quarter. It weighed a half an ounce.
Yeah.
Didn't. And the detective absolutely agreed with that those wounds from John Taylor were all smaller caliber. Any of this stuff would have just torn his arm apart or his body apart. So, okay. So the next point that I wanted to make that I was shocked about is we had a friend that went to Carthage, and he measured the hole in the door panel, and it was 0.58 inches, and he used a digital caliper to do that. So we tried to figure out what size of ball was shot through that door. And the Lyon brothers said it was a 69 caliber musket ball. And Sam Weston was like, he measured it and he's like, there's no way it's 69 caliber. And so we measured it ourselves again with the digital caliper, and it was 0.58. John Tucker did that for us in Carthage. So I was super excited to shoot through these panels and see what happened. And here's the first shot through with the 69 caliber musket, 69 caliber ball with 80 grains. And this hole, we used our digital caliper, came at 0.58. Like,
that is crazy.
It's exactly
the size.
Right on. And then I gave that to the detective, and he took the 69 caliber ball and he goes, watch this. And that's what Sam Weston did. He put the ball and he's like, you can't get that through the hole in the door in Carthage. And I'm like, you can't get it through the hole here. We know we shot it with a 69 caliber. Why won't that ball fit? So either the ball is deforming on the way through there,
yeah,
or the wood is expanding and contracting, or something's weird's happening. But that was 0.58 on some of the other 69 caliber shots. It was 0.55, 0.52. On the 50 caliber shots, they were 0.38. And that was with the pistol or the rifle, either or. It was 0.38 to 0.42 is the size of that hole. So it's like, okay.
You still can't get those bullets through those either.
Yeah, and the point being, if it's 0.58 today, because I assume people stuck their fingers in it over time, it didn't start at 0.4 and then go up to 0.58. The only ball that could have made that hole in that panel was a 69 caliber ball. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, the detective agreed with it as well. We've shot enough panels to know at this point that measurement's going to be smaller than the actual ball itself, but there's a certain tolerance amount for that, and it fits the hole that's in the panel there in Carthage today. So
yeah,
it was so what have we proven at this point? We have proven that the panel was shot with 69 caliber ball. We don't know what weapon fired it. Well, we do. Only the musket could fire that 69 caliber. There wasn't a rifle or a pistol that could fire that, but we don't know how much gunpowder it had. So we shot the dang thing with every kind of load.
Yeah.
80 all the way down to 50, and it still caused massive damage. So we know that shot through the door panel is not what struck Hyrum. It couldn't have. The angle isn't right, and the damage to Hyrum's head.
It's not consistent, yeah, with that size of a bullet.
That's exactly right. Okay. Now, we talked about this a little bit. If we had put more gunpowder into our weapons, what would have happened to those ballistic heads?
Like, I think the damage might not have been like as extensive, you know, but there'd still be holes.
Yeah, it would have just punched right through easier.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have caused that massive explosion to the front, but there would have been an even clearer exit out of the back.
Yeah. I
agree. Okay, so a lot of people have asked, why have you not simulated the shot under the chin?
We did.
The answer is, of course we did that.
Yeah.
No, it's not easy finding a 30 caliber 6-shooter pepper box.
Yeah.
But we found a 5-shooter 30 caliber. Do you remember the auction?
Yeah.
And I think you found it and you were like, oh my gosh, we found one of these. And I was like, we got to get it.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know if we wanted to risk it on the auction. Did we do the auction or did we do the bid now price? I can't remember.
I think we did the auction and we got it. I put a price higher than what we got it for, but yeah, we got it.
I think it costed like $700, $750.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So it shows up. It is a period 5-shooter 30 caliber.
Yeah.
And we were so excited.
That you didn't dare bring because it's still loaded and we can't get it unloaded.
Yes. So we loaded it up and there's no caps on today's market to fire that gun with. So you had to have your friend make some.
Which was what was interesting about him making all the caps for all these guns is I'd given him, you know, hey, this is what we need you to do. Can you do it? Yeah, I can do it. Okay, we need it by such and such date. Well, that date came and I called him and I said, hey, do you happen to have those? And he's like, no. And he's like, when do you need them by? in like a half hour. Right. He's like, shoot. So he hurried and made some real quick. And I remember going to his house and we had to put the alcohol on it and stuff to get the powder to hold inside the caps before they would ignite and stuff. And it was like photo finish to get them all done. And we hurried over and we didn't even know if they would even fire or not.
Right. I remember looking at that pistol like, man, are you sure you want to try and fire this thing? Because it is not a remake. It was an original. What if the barrel had been weakened and the thing blows up in your hand? I was like super worried about that.
Yeah, I think we had the same conversation that we did with this rifle. We said, do you want to do it or do you want me to do it? And I'm like, gosh, I'll just do it. Okay.
I know. So you go up, stick it under the chin, click, click, nothing's happening. We're like, what the heck's going on? And I think you lift it up and you're like, I don't know. One goes off.
Yeah.
We're freaking out.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, it can work. So we loaded it up again, put all the caps, and we could never get the thing to work.
Yeah, the problem is the firing mechanism that comes over top the cap and smacks it down to be able to ignite it. You can't, like with the device that we had that we were making the caps with, we couldn't get them small enough, but yet big enough to go around what we needed to, and then small enough so the thing could fit over. Like you have to have the exact precision so the firing mechanism can come over top of it, and it was just getting stuck on it.
If we just had a lighter and lit, would that have worked?
No.
Why not? Why do you have to have a spark from the...
I don't think that we could have been able to hold the lighter in the position to be able to get the fire. Right. In my opinion, I don't think it would have worked, but...
Okay, so we couldn't get the dang thing to fire. So what did we end up doing is we used a handgun, a 22, and we fired it, and what happened?
It exploded the head all over me. I wasn't even shooting it.
That was the second
I wasn't even shooting it.
So the first shot you shot it through the chin, we lined it up, and it didn't come out of the nose, but it did totally shatter the maxilla, which is exactly what happened to Hyrum. So I was like, okay, it didn't exit out of the nose. Probably didn't have as much power as the 30 caliber would have. I don't know how many grains of powder they would have used.
Sure.
So in my mind, I was like, okay, I could see how this would work. That line busting the maxilla, we proved that could happen. And then afterwards, you guys are like, let's try this, and it blew up all over you. Maybe we'll show that clip. So yes, once we can get caps that actually work on that 5-shooter, we'll try it again.
I know that's the shot that everybody wants to see. They want to see that shot to see what damage it does.
Yeah, but right now that thing's loaded, sitting in my garage loaded. So we got to figure out how to unload it first and clean it out, and then we'll get caps and again, safety first. I don't want anybody to get hurt on it. It did fire that one time, so we know it works.
Yeah, so we kept trying again. I remember, I think I pulled that trigger at least 40 times at one point, just waiting for it to go off, and it never went off. Like, and it just kept rotating the barrel around and nothing.
The things we do to try and figure this out. So crazy. All right. Thank you for your help in running these tests. I want to get a little more personal now. Did you consider it a risk to be seen in this movie?
A little bit, but I've been at this for so long that it didn't really affect me that much. I was actually excited to shoot the guns. Like, I enjoyed that part of testing stuff out. So especially against ballistics gel stuff, like I was super intrigued to see what kind of damage and stuff it would do. So for me, it was more exciting, and I didn't care about who saw me doing it.
So, I mean, I asked many professionals, historians, pathologists to be a part of this movie, and they said, no way. They'd start out and say yes, and then they realized what I was talking about, and they were like, I'm not going to be a part of this.
Really?
So I was like super grateful that you were willing to do it and be seen in there, and I was just wondering, why did you do it? Why did you say yes?
I mean, like I said, I've been on this path for such a long time that to me, it didn't really change anything for me. My family and my friends already know where I stand. So, I don't think it would have had the repercussions that some people by being in a movie like this would have, like where a family or friends saw it, they would instantly hold it against them or really think negative on him. And my family, and we've already been down that road. So I like I said, I felt more honored to be able to do it, to be honest.
It's amazing, man. Has there been a reaction from anybody that saw you in it?
So people that are on the same path, they've seen it, that they're my friends, and they think it's cool, you know.
Cool.
They don't. Good. I haven't heard of anybody yet that would be shocked by it, but I don't know. I'm sure eventually it'll get out there, but I'm not too worried about it.
Do you believe that the martyrdom was an inside job?
Yes, I think for sure it was an inside job.
What percentage of what actually happened, how accurate do you think you are on our reenactment?
I mean, I wasn't a part of the first movie, but I did see it and stuff. And that exact detail of how that all went, I'd say maybe 80%, you know, like it's hard to really get it all. But right. As far as John Taylor and Willard Richards' account of how the shots went off and the damage that was done and how they got there, I'm 100% sure that's not correct in my opinion.
Right.
But yeah. And so but the way that you've presented it and with these other calibers and stuff, I would say it's more likely that your theory as in an inside job, smaller calibers were used inside that jail. I think that's a lot more plausible.
Yeah. If in fact Hyrum was shot under the chin by a smaller caliber that exited the nose, what is the chances that Willard and John Taylor were lying versus misremembering what really happened?
Yeah, I think for sure lying more than misremembering. Is there any way
to see that? The detective was like, well, I think they could have just been misremembering. I'm like, misremembering that he was shot through the door when he wasn't shot through the door and he was laying on the ground and a second shot through the chin? He's like, well, they just came up with that to explain the wounds. And maybe they didn't even see it. So he thought there was a chance they could have just been misremembering. And I'm like, that's a very specific shot.
Yeah.
To get under the chin and come through the nose. So I think it's more probable to say they were lying about what happened.
Yeah. They had plenty of time to think about it too.
Right.
You know, before they really relayed.
Which is interesting you say that, because in Willard's first account, he doesn't even talk about Joseph getting killed. He doesn't even mention the wounds. So he does have time to plan out the story of how this is going to happen. He just doesn't. He talks about John going to the window, but not how Joseph was shot.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh? But he does say that Hyrum, in his very first account, Hyrum was shot through that door. So I think he had to come up with that pretty quickly, because that's the story he told the mob when they came back up to finish off Hyrum. So I was dead. They're like, you got him through that door.
Yeah. So
they just started telling that story. Oh, we shot the Hyrum through the door. And they didn't. That shot couldn't have struck Hyrum. That's not the shot that hit him.
Yeah.
Okay. If it was an inside job, what are the ramifications to the members of the LDS Church today?
Wow. Yeah, I think you've got to really analyze your beliefs, like down to the core. Like you've got to go to the core of your theology and what it believes. And if that's true, how could you believe in something that the church is led by men who took out one of your prophets and then the successor and possibly the next successor? You know, like how could you affiliate with that group and think it's okay?
That line of authority from Joseph to Brigham, so on and so forth, to the prophet today is everything to an LDS member, that line of authority. Can you have someone in that line be a murderer and that authority is still preserved?
I don't think so if you're killing the person that the authority came from.
People have said that to me. They said, it doesn't matter if they kill him. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They still had the keys. They could have passed them on.
How can they justify that? Because they don't want to admit that they're wrong or that they've been led astray this whole time. Like that's the problem with a lot of people in the world today is we don't want to admit that what we know, because we feel like deep down it's a core feeling that we know is true. So we can't ever admit that there is a possibility I'm wrong. And like, that's where I've gone in my life is I'm willing to look at anything and say, I might be wrong. Like, I don't even think I know it all. Like I've been on this path a long time and I don't think I know it all. I'm constantly figuring out new stuff and my beliefs are besides the belief in the Savior and what he's done for us, there's other things that come and go, but.
So you're talking about being awake. How long have you been awake?
So I learned this stuff in 2007, from a guy who taught me scripture lesson, in Lehigh. And it was over about a 2-year process of like learning through him and going and visiting with him and sitting down, and he'd give us 3 hours to 6 hours to 8 hours at a time scripture lessons on basically government and what's going on, and blew my mind back then. And from reading and praying, and then he got into like Isaiah and Jeremiah and stuff, and just started relating stuff to us that started to make sense. And then he'd show us pictures and stuff that was going on, and it really rocked us to the core, where we were like, what is going on here?
Before you explain that rocking, let me ask you the same thing I asked Rebecca last week. What does it mean to be awake?
So for me, it's that you've awoke to your awful situation, like it talks about in the Book of Mormon, and you've learned to rely on Jesus Christ over a man. You don't put anybody else in front of you and Jesus Christ. Like you go straight to him for answers. You use the scriptures as your guide, and you don't worry about what other people are saying around you.
So awake to your awful situation, what does that mean?
That we have been misled. Like what you're showing everybody is the same thing, in my opinion, is our whole lives we're taught a narrative, and we're taught something, and from some man we get given this stuff. And when you finally, in my opinion, like I said, wake up and realize it has nothing to do with these men. It has everything to do with God and Jesus Christ. Yeah. And so, like I said, so my journey, like I said, 2007, we've been in and out of different groups of people that along the way were teaching different doctrines and different beliefs, that at points we thought, well, maybe this is how we see God, like Doctrine and Covenants 93 talks about. So we'd go along with these different beliefs to some degree, where we're like, maybe we got to go down this path to be able to have these experiences. And then because of man, right? Like we kept having these ideas, like this man is showing us this, so maybe this is the way it is.
Right.
And then we'd realize, there's problems with this man over here too, And then it's like, it's hard to break yourself of the idea of following a man.
This guy that was teaching you these things, was he a member of the LDS church?
Yeah.
Was he active at the time?
Active, yeah.
But he was clearly
he knew what was going on. So he'd go to church and he'd be like, man, I know they're going to kick me out of here sometime, because he would try to wake people up, but people weren't really ready in 2007. He'd have people over, but...
What was the thing that did it for you guys?
For me, it was the handshake, the pictures of the handshake with the prophet and the patriarchal grip, or not. With
the Pope, you mean?
Yeah. So Thomas Monson with President Bush, he showed that. And then he went through all the scriptures that show, and then he'd pull out newspaper articles that talked about the United Nations and how wicked they are. And then we would be like reading scriptures and be like, he would say, this is what I think it is. So we'd be like, holy cow. And then we'd go home and be like, okay, so this is what he thinks it is. Like, let's read it again. Let's pray about it. And let's figure out if we feel this way, and it would take time. It's not just like automatically we're like, we know now the church is wrong. But, so over time it was like steps, you learn the church, it's affiliated with the United Nations. The United Nations isn't a good thing. What are we doing? And then you see the prophet shaking hands with these men in things that you do in supposed sacred ceremonies. And it's like, why are they doing this?
Those photos have been floating around on the internet forever. And 99 out of 100 people that look at it, members of the church, are like, that doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
Why did that, for you and your wife, strike you in a way that made you think possibly the church isn't being honest with us?
The Spirit told us this is right. This is what they're talking about. When you read when you read Isaiah chapter 28, and you read Jeremiah chapter 23, and that it's the context of today versus back in Isaiah's time or Jeremiah's time. That's a whole difference. That's why people don't understand, in my opinion, Isaiah, is because they think they're only talking about these men back then. But in my opinion, we were taught this is our day today. And it struck a chord with me to where I was like, this is our day he's talking about. And so when I started reading it and I could see it, the similarities and the would come through, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here to make it make sense, but I would see like when the scriptures would say something like a boat or something, right? And it would be symbolic. Yeah. It would make a picture in my mind of today, not back then, like that's just an example. And so as I was reading through these scriptures and seeing it from that version of this is today, this is today, this is today, and then the Spirit was confirming it over and over and over again, that's what made me feel like this is the truth. And so at that point we decided we got to get away from this wickedness. And so not the church, not the church, but with like the wickedness of the world, that like the United Nations stuff, and try to get as far away from there. You had the
chance to turn away and say, this is not church approved material. This is making us doubt. This is a problem.
Yeah.
It's hurting our testimonies. You could have turned from that. Why didn't you?
So I had an experience in the MTC that I got an answer from God that I know the Book of Mormon was true. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I'll never forget. So from that point forward, I always knew the Book of Mormon was true. So I held on to that with everything I had. The Book of Mormon's true. Even though all this other stuff over here might not be right, I know the Book of Mormon's true.
Yeah.
So as we were going through all this stuff, and going through these different organizations and people that were having these meetings over here and stuff, we held on to that belief. The Book of Mormon's true, regardless of what these other little beliefs that people like to break off and think, well, this is our little thing over here. We like this part of the doctrine and we're going to hold on to it with everything. And that's going to be what we're going to teach others and bring them in to our fold that believe the same way that we do, know? And so once you can break all that down and say, it's just between you, the Savior, and the scriptures that he has for us, like it makes things a lot more clear in your mind.
How long ago was that you were awake?
2023. So
okay.
Yeah.
So wait, when? It was
2007. So we're like 16 years into this.
16 years. Yeah. So Rebecca and I woke up in 2019.
Yeah, but you guys
like doing it for 16 years. I'm just like, what else do we need to go through and learn here?
No, you guys have experienced a lot. Like I think people that are waking up today are experiencing a lot in such a short time that it's almost more traumatic than it was for us. Like we took steps when we needed to get us here where we need to be. Like we felt like we were led to where we live.
Right.
We were led to be in this valley. We were led to, like, I just gave up jobs, like completely gave them up. Like, nope, I'm not even going to work. Like we moved to this area without me having a job at all. Like, I don't know, the Lord will provide, I guess. And he did, and he's been super gracious with us for sure.
So I find your experience to be on this path for as long as you have to be invaluable. And I know you've pointed out a lot of pitfalls to watch out for, to not get hung up on this or that. There's a lot of people that have woken up even as little as a few months ago and are just starting to being willing to say something's wrong. They've felt it for a long time, but they're finally willing to admit something is wrong here. What's your best counsel or advice?
So don't give up on God, like he's there for you. We as a people need to be broken down. We do. I've talked to you about this week because I got turned on to that book, The Heavenly Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said you've read it as well.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It is.
It's like life-changing for me. Like, and I just read it or just listened to it this week. A friend of mine referred it to me. And so I'm like, I'm going to listen to this thing. And as I get going through this thing, awesome, amazing stories that this guy went through in China to share Jesus Christ with these people and help these people turn to Christianity or to be saved, and had a super success. Well, at the very end of the book, after all these things, it starts to get kind of boring. But he says one thing as he's going through there. He talks about how he had to flee China because he had to escape from prison at one point because he was being held there for teaching Christianity.
Right.
And he says that he was in a devotional or something, and these people had come up to him and said, how come, he's telling him all these experiences he'd had. And they said, how come we don't have these experiences? And he said, you don't need God. He's like, you have your houses and your luxuries and all this stuff you have. He's like, when we need God in China. He's like, when my dad had cancer, this is what got him on the path, is his dad had cancer. They sold everything as a family, everything. He's like, we gave it all so we could pay for him to be healed, and it didn't work. And so we turned to God. It's like, you don't need God. You have God, like you have all this stuff, and a lot of times we do, like we get so comfortable in our lifestyles and what we have that we have to have this stuff. It's like, I feel like we need to be humbled. So like, I think there's a humbling coming for all of us. Right. And I think we all see it. It's on the horizon. Something's coming. We don't know when or what or how it's going to happen exactly. Yeah. But I think there's a awakening that's going to come even on a greater scale. It's going to wake up all these people to come around to this.
So this guy in China, in prison, zero connection to anything Christian, not a part of any church, in prison, did he have his baptism of fire and Holy Ghost?
I mean, he doesn't say he did, but I would imagine he did, He
describes his experience.
Yeah.
Is that what you thought it was? Because that's what I thought it was.
Yeah, like I said, he doesn't say it that way, but he had some experiences that would blow your mind, And he still had issues, right? Like he still had, even though you have those experiences, I think that's what's interesting in this realm that we're in, is we see these people that say they've had these experiences, and they're, like they're not perfect still, which is okay. God still works with us, right? Even though we're not perfect, he still is able to work with us and help us to be able to help others.
Do you need a church? Do you need any man to get to the Lord?
No. I think that's a big stumbling block that we've been taught in our lives, that we need to be a part of, or a group, right? Like an affiliation or something. And while people that are waking up today, I think have a little bit more of an advantage because there seems to be more of us that's growing. Yeah. Like when we did it, it was us, we had like 2 or 3 people that we could converse with and talk openly with. But now it's like, there's Facebook that's going rampant with it. And you turn around and you talk to people and people are seeing stuff. So, I mean, there is a great awakening. And I think this is what's waking up people to the call out, in my opinion. There's a call out that God calls us all spiritually to leave Babylon and to get away from all this wickedness. And it's Babylon in the world. It's Babylon in our churches. It's Babylon in our own personal lives. So we have to make the distinction and say, what am I willing to do for God, and what steps do we need to take? And it's hard on people, right? It doesn't make it any easier that there's more people out there. Yeah. It's still a hard journey for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're friends. I love being able to talk about this
me
stuff.
too. It's awesome.
Thanks for being a part of the movie. Thanks for coming on the podcast and talking about your experience, and thank you for your testimony, brother. It means a lot. And we're going to keep going. For all of the people that watch the movie and are like, I'm not sure, I don't know, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep digging into the evidence. And that's one thing I wanted to invite you guys. I said it earlier, if there's a test you want to see, a ballistic test you want us to run, even if it means I have to get a new gel head or whatever, put it in the comments and we'll go out and we'll run tests through wood and panels and whatever to see what we can learn from it. If you have a theory that you want to share it in the comments and we'll test that theory. We're going to keep going on this until we figure out the truth. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time.